Some bedrooms attract angels, others attract spiritual attacks, and most people don't know the difference. Tonight, I'll expose the setup that opens the door without your permission. You think you sleep alone, but something watches while you dream. I used to wake up tired, even after hours of sleep. I blamed stress, late nights, everything except my own room. But behind the silence, something waited. Watching, patient. Every night felt like sinking into shadows I could never name. I didn't understand at first. Why did prayer feel heavy on my tongue? Why did my spirit feel disconnected, as though every word only reached the ceiling and went no further? Why did sleep feel like surrender instead of rest? I didn't see anything with my eyes, but I felt something pull, as if an unseen hand was collecting fragments of strength I didn't remember giving away. I would wake up with memories of dreams I didn't choose. Voices calling my name, footsteps approaching yet never reaching the bed, a presence standing near the door. Waiting. Always waiting. I told myself I imagined it. I tried to explain away the weight in my chest each morning, the pressure that made breathing feel borrowed. Friends said, "You worry too much." But they didn't see the pattern. They didn't feel the silent exchange happening while I slept. The truth began to reveal itself slowly, in the kind of moments you try to forget. Objects shifting from where you left them, a chill only on one side of the room, waking up exactly at the same hour every night, like someone was calling for attention without making a sound. I didn't want to admit it, but something in that room had permission, and I was the one who had opened the door without knowing how. I remember the night everything changed. I woke up, not because of noise, but because of stillness. A stillness too intense to be natural, like the air was holding its breath. I couldn't move at first. My eyes were open, but I felt observed, examined, as though my thoughts were being read while I lay helpless. No visible figure, yet the presence filled the room so fully I could feel the shape of it pressing against my spirit. I wanted to shout a prayer, but the words stayed locked behind my teeth. Only my mind cried out, and that silent prayer, the one I thought no one could hear, was when I realized something shocking. Whatever stood in that room wasn't there by force. It had access. And access always comes from agreement, spoken or unspoken. That was the night I accepted the truth I had avoided. Your bedroom is more than four walls. It is a gate, and every object, every habit, every unseen choice either guards that gate or opens it wide. Some things you keep close invite protection. Other things you ignore grant permission, and permission, once given, is never taken back without a fight. The next morning, I didn't tell anyone. What could I say? Who would believe that peace can be stolen quietly, not with noise, but with subtle presence? I didn't understand everything then, but I understood enough to know this. Before anything changes in your life, you must first understand what you sleep beside. And once you see what is really active in your room, you can't unsee it. Tonight, I'll show you the exact setup that opened my door, the overlooked habit that gave access, and how I closed it. Not with fear, not with noise, but with understanding. And I'm not talking about candles, dream catchers, or symbols. I'm talking about where you place one object that affects what enters your sleep. Because spiritual doors are not only opened by rituals, they're opened by arrangements. You think habits guide your day, but arrangements guide your night. Long before I understood this, I believed danger only followed dramatic choices, the kind you could point to and say, yes, that must be the reason. But access didn't begin with that. It began with something I placed in the room, something I positioned without thought, and every night it altered the atmosphere just enough to weaken resistance while I slept. I didn't know that where something rests in your room can determine what rests over your life. At first, I noticed the change in small fragments, a heaviness when I prayed at night, a restlessness that made me delay sleep, whispers and dreams that sounded like familiar voices but carried intentions I didn't recognize. I dismissed it. It felt too small to matter. But the smallest things are often where the greatest agreements hide. I remember waking up one night with the feeling I was late for something. Not a meeting, not work, but late in the spirit. Like something had passed through while I wasn't aware enough to resist. My body felt rested, but my spirit felt as if it had fought battles I couldn't recall. The dreams became more vivid. Some felt like warnings, Others felt like rehearsals, as if I was being prepared for something I hadn't signed up for. And it always started the same way. A presence entering quietly, just past the edge of sleep, moving closer each night, not by force, but by invitation I didn't know I had given. I didn't understand what changed until someone asked me a question that froze me mid-sentence. What did you move in your room recently? Not what did you buy? Not what did you burn? Not what did you pray over? But what did you move? The question hit me harder than I expected, because I remembered exactly when everything shifted. The day I rearranged my room and placed a single object in a position that aligned with where my head rested at night. I didn't think location mattered. I didn't think direction mattered. I didn't think placement mattered. But the arrangement created a channel. Not one I saw with my eyes, but one my spirit recognized too late. I didn't speak of it to anyone for a long time because it sounded unbelievable. That a simple placement could weaken defenses and turn a bedroom into a gateway without sound or ceremony. But the truth is this: some access doesn't need words. Some access doesn't wait for permission spoken aloud. Some access is granted when you align the wrong thing with the most vulnerable part of you, your resting place. That was when the revelation struck me. The room wasn't just where I slept. It was where battles were fought. Battles I didn't remember, but always felt. And the arrangement I thought was harmless was the silent agreement that allowed those battles to begin. After listening to people who fought night terrors, and after watching believers recover from spiritual oppression caused by things in their rooms, I noticed the same pattern over and over again. Different faces, different stories, but the same invisible chain around their rest, the same exhaustion carved into their voices, the same confession whispered with embarrassment. I don't know why my sleep feels stolen. They all described a presence that entered quietly, a pressure that settled over the chest, dreams that felt assigned rather than random, and mornings that felt like waking from a battle they never remembered joining. At first I thought their experiences were unique, isolated, but as testimonies continued, the thread became undeniable. Something in their rooms, something they lived with every night, had become a silent agreement, a doorway they never realized they built. The first time, I ignored it, until the attacks came. Something pressed on my chest while I slept, and I woke up gasping. I said nothing, pretended it was exhaustion, but I knew better. The second time, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights, and I understood why. I heard movement in a room where no one walked. I heard breathing that wasn't mine. And every prayer I whispered felt like pushing through heavy water. I learned silence can be loud when something is waiting for your agreement. The third time, someone begged me not to share this publicly. They said revealing it would bring attention I wasn't prepared for. They said some doors stay open because people are afraid to admit which key unlocked them. I almost stayed quiet. Almost. And what I discovered next almost made me rearrange my entire house. Not for decoration, but for protection. I realized some objects don't just sit in a room, they speak. And some habits don't just feel harmless, they open the way for something to enter. I'll reveal the exact bedroom setup in a moment. But first, you need to understand why it matters. There was a woman who kept waking up at 3:08 a.m., shaking, breath heavy, always feeling watched in her own room. She described it as sleeping with her eyes closed but her spirit awake. No sleep, no peace, no breakthrough. She worked harder, prayed longer, fasted often, yet every morning felt like beginning from below zero. Her strength was leaking somewhere. But she didn't know how or where. She prayed at night, whispering words she could barely finish. God, please, let me rest tonight. But somehow, each dawn felt heavier than the last. The more she prayed, the more exhausted she became, as if something answered her prayers with resistance, almost like her words were heard but blocked before they could reach. One morning she confessed to a friend, I feel like something stands near my bed, but I never see it. I sense footsteps, breath, attention. It feels close enough to touch, yet nothing is ever there when I open my eyes. Fear began changing her habits. She stopped sleeping in the dark. She left music playing throughout the night. She even pushed her bed to a different corner, hoping the presence would lose its position. But the hour 3:08 a.m. kept returning, like a reminder written into her nights. Her prayers turned from strength to survival. She stopped asking for blessings. She started asking just to make it through until morning. Her voice trembled one day when she said, "I'm tired of waking up weaker than I slept." Everything shifted the day someone visited her home, someone who didn't know what she was going through. No stories, no hints, no warnings. They walked into her bedroom, took one step, then another, and suddenly froze, their eyes fixed on something near her bed. A single object she never questioned, a familiar item she thought was harmless. But that person stared as if recognizing a doorway she couldn't see. Their breathing changed. Shoulders tensed. Silence filled the room. The type of silence that carries understanding without words. She didn't know whether to speak or stay quiet. She simply watched as they looked at that object, then back at her. Their expression holding a truth she felt but didn't yet fully grasp. Before they said anything, before they even pointed, she felt heat rise in her chest, as if her spirit already knew what her mind had denied. Something in this room was giving permission. She swallowed hard. Her hands began to shake, because deep down she felt she already knew the answer, but was afraid to admit it. That moment became her turning point, not because she understood, but because she could no longer ignore what she felt. And what happened next? Her nights changed. Her strength returned. Her prayers rose without resistance, but none of it started with courage. It started with awareness. And the reason? It was that one thing near her bed, the one she trusted, the one that seemed harmless, the one she never questioned. I'll tell you what that thing was, but before I reveal it, you must understand why certain items attract attacks even when they appear innocent. Spiritual attacks are attracted to three conditions: confusion, chaos, and compromised boundaries. Your bedroom is your altar of rest. If the altar is disordered, the spirit of rest is weakened, and spirits that bring restlessness are empowered. I didn't know this in the beginning. All I knew was that sleep stopped feeling like recovery and started feeling like surrender, as if I entered each night weaker than I entered the last. It wasn't just tiredness, it was depletion, like something was taking without asking, and I kept waking up with less than I slept with. Let me reveal the first principle I learned the hard way. Objects placed directly facing your bed, especially reflective surfaces, become spiritual gateways for two reasons. They double your presence, and they magnify your vulnerability. I didn't realize mine was doing that. It was just a mirror, nothing special, nothing dramatic. I placed it there because the spot looked convenient. I never thought about what it meant to have my reflection waiting for me every time I opened my eyes. I never questioned why I felt watched even when I was alone. I never asked why my dreams felt crowded, as if someone else was standing in the room I thought belonged only to me. It started subtly. I noticed the air felt heavier when I lay down, as though the room came alive only when the lights went off. Some nights I felt warmth on my face, but the window was closed and the air was still. Other nights came with a cold that reached bone level. Cold that felt aware, not random. The mirror never moved, yet its presence felt active. I didn't see shadows inside it, but I sensed a kind of echo, like my reflection was holding a version of me I never recognized, something silent yet awake. I used to think reflective surfaces only showed you. I didn't know they could also claim you. Because whatever reflects you while you sleep does more than duplicate your image. It holds a trace of your presence, and traces can be used as access. One night, during a half-waking state, I felt as though I was being observed from both sides. My body lying still on the bed, and a second version of me staring silently from the reflection. As if my image had become a doorway, and I had unknowingly stood on both sides of it. When you don't guard your altar of rest, your vulnerability becomes loud, even if your voice is silent. That's when I began to understand. The issue wasn't the object by itself, but what the object activated when positioned without intention. Placement is permission, even when you don't mean to give any. I know this may be uncomfortable to hear, but I'm not sharing theory. I'm sharing what happened when I ignored the subtle signs and what changed only when I acknowledged them. If you're still watching, comment, "I'm here." Only serious people make it this far. Because from here on, the revelations become heavier and the truth becomes clearer. The mirror was only the beginning. Remember the woman who felt watched? The one who woke up at the same hour each night, feeling her strength drain even while she slept, feeling prayers lose force before they could gather breath? For weeks, she blamed exhaustion. She blamed stress, long days, restless thoughts. But she never suspected the object that faced her bed, the silent observer reflecting her every moment in that room. What she didn't realize was this. Each time she lay defenseless, eyes closed, spirit exposed in rest, something in that room acknowledged her more than she acknowledged herself. The object wasn't enchanted. It wasn't decorated with symbols. It wasn't purchased from anywhere unusual. It was simply positioned exactly where it shouldn't be. A large mirror, placed directly opposite her bed. She didn't think much of it. It made the room look bigger, brighter, helped catch the morning light. It was convenient, familiar, almost comforting. But every night when her body rested, her reflection rested with her. And that double presence, that constant echo of herself in the room, gave more access than she understood. She thought she was sleeping alone. Yet in that room, her image never slept. And every attack happened when she was most unguarded. When the mind drifts, when the spirit listens without speaking, when dreams blur into whispers. The mirror didn't summon anything, but it amplified her presence. Twice. Where she lay once, she was seen twice. Where her spirit rested once, it lingered twice. And in realms where presence and access intertwine, that was enough. Night after night, the same pressure, the same heaviness, the same invisible weight pressing down on her chest while her mouth couldn't form words. As though the room remembered her even after she woke. Until the night she could no longer ignore the pattern. In desperation, she shifted the mirror. Not out of superstition, but out of a quiet conviction that something was observing what it had no right to watch. No prayer spoken aloud, no rituals, just one decision: remove the second presence. And after moving it, the attacks stopped within 3 nights. 3 nights. No more sudden awakenings gasping for air. No more pressure holding her still. No more dreams that felt borrowed. Her room felt smaller, but lighter. She finally slept, and woke with clarity instead of confusion. That was when she realized something many ignore. Some objects don't carry power because of what they are, but because of where they stand and how they frame your presence in the room. And mirrors are only one part of the setup. There are 2 more bedroom arrangements you must understand. Arrangements that give access without permission, that invite presence without announcement, that keep the room active even while your spirit tries to rest. But I'll reveal them shortly. Before I tell you the second one, you need to understand the question she finally asked herself. The question that changed everything. If my room reflects me twice, what else in here speaks for me when I'm silent? Hold that thought. Because the next arrangement doesn't reflect you. It remembers you. I didn't speak about that night for a long time. Silence felt safer than admitting what I had sensed. But silence is also a doorway, and every time I ignored what happened, that doorway stayed open. The strange part was this: nothing looked dangerous. No strange markings, no obvious symbols, just a room like anyone else's. Yet mornings felt like I had given something away without remembering the trade. If this is speaking to you, type I receive. Days turned into weeks, and the exhaustion deepened. But the moment that forced me to confront everything longer came unexpectedly. A morning where I woke up and felt empty in a way sleep could not fix. No fear, no panic, just a quiet loss, like someone had taken a piece of peace and left silence in its place. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my head in my hands, trying to breathe through a heaviness that had no shape. And something whispered back to my memory. What if your room isn't resting you, but draining you? Share this with someone who wakes up tired. That thought stayed with me for hours. It echoed in places inside me I didn't know could echo. And finally, I gathered the strength to do what I had avoided. I began to look, not with suspicion, but with awareness. The first place I checked was the bedside table. A routine spot. Nothing unusual, but as I picked up each object, something clicked. Not physically, but spiritually. Memories surfaced of things spoken over those items, moments tied to grief, to heartbreak, to anger I had never released. I remembered praying in that corner while holding bitterness in my heart, asking for peace while refusing forgiveness. I realized then, My prayers weren't blocked, they were contested. Comment fire if you're still here. I moved to the closet next, an old gift I never wore but never threw away. It was given during a season filled with confusion and spiritual conflict. I left it hanging there for years, not knowing memories can cling to fabric the way scent clings to smoke. There was more than the object itself. It was what I refused to let go. Every night I slept near it, I unknowingly held on to old agreements, old connections, old wounds, and wounds attract what mirrors them. Pause and send this to someone struggling with sleep. Then I understood the pattern. What I allowed to stay near my rest, stayed near my spirit. And every unresolved memory, every object tied to a past that had never healed, formed a bridge, a quiet permission in the night. I remembered the presence that stood near my door. I remembered the stillness that held the air captive. And suddenly, a confession rose inside me. I didn't just feel drained because of what was attacking me. I felt drained because of what I refused to release. That night, I made a decision, not out of fear, but clarity. I stood in the center of the room, held my breath, and whispered the words I had been avoiding. Anything that has permission here that I never meant to give, your access ends now. I felt the atmosphere shift, not instantly, not dramatically, but quietly, like something realized I finally understood the rules. Some people think warfare always sounds loud, but the greatest battles are the ones where revelation becomes your weapon, where you stop running and start recognizing. And once I recognized why my rest was stolen, I couldn't go back to pretending. If this resonates, type I receive. Because the next part, the part I'm about to reveal, is where everything changed. The habit I discovered wasn't random, wasn't decorative, wasn't innocent. Yet I never saw its meaning until I traced the pattern to its source. There was one nightly routine, one habit, that gave quiet agreement every time I did it. And once I exposed it, the atmosphere in the room was never the same again. The second setup that attracts attacks is a cluttered room, not physically only, spiritually. A room that feels like yesterday's battles never left. Where emotions linger in the air like dust that never settles. Where arguments, wounds, and unspoken thoughts still echo in corners you avoid looking at. Clutter is more than items stacked without order. It is memory without closure. Pain without expression. Objects that still carry the weight of when they were last touched. Chaos weakens ownership. Weak ownership weakens authority. And weakened authority invites invasion. I once lived inside that atmosphere without realizing I had surrendered parts of myself. Clothes thrown on chairs, papers I never sorted, gifts I kept out of obligation, items from old seasons holding me hostage to who I used to be. I told myself, I'll clean it soon. But the longer I delayed, the heavier the air became. Like the room itself remembered everything I tried to forget. I didn't see shadows walking, but I felt the absence of strength. As though something was feeding on the disorder I refused to confront. And every morning I woke up weaker, not because I didn't sleep, but because I wasn't the one in control. That was the first time I understood. If your room carries chaos, your spirit carries fatigue. And fatigue is the doorway through which attacks walk without resistance. The third setup is when your bed faces the entrance directly. Some testimonies speak of footsteps that stop at the threshold. Others describe figures that watch without crossing. But when your bed aligns perfectly with the doorway, your sleep becomes the first target. You become accessible, visible, unprotected. I didn't believe this until the night I woke up, not from noise but from presence. My eyes opened on their own, and my gaze went straight to the entrance, as though something stood there quietly, studying the space between us. I didn't see a form. I didn't need to. The air held a pressure that only appears when you are being observed. And the strange part? My body didn't move. It was like the alignment of the bed turned my rest into exposure, placing me directly in the path of what passed through that door. I remember lying there, feeling watched by what I couldn't name, realizing my deepest weakness wasn't fear. It was access I didn't recognize. I shifted the bed weeks later, not out of superstition, but out of understanding. Position reveals priority, and where you place your rest determines what can reach you first. And the most dangerous alignment is when all three setups combine, the mirror facing you, the doorway aligned, and clutter draining your authority. Because when reflection, exposure, and disorder meet in one space, the room does more than hold your body. It holds your battles. And once a battle makes a home in your room, it never stays silent for long. Before I learned to fight back, I thought transformation came through noise, through shouting, through force, through trying to overpower what was once welcomed. But the night I broke the agreement, the night I took back the space where my strength was leaking, it happened quietly. Not in chaos, but in clarity. Tonight, before you sleep, walk through your room slowly. Don't rush. Don't skip corners. Don't turn on background music to distract yourself. Just walk with attention, because the room where you close your eyes is the room that holds every version of you. The healed you, the wounded you, the silent you, the praying you, the exhausted you who pretends to be fine, and the you that no one sees weep before sunrise. As you move, notice what faces you. What object meets your eyes the moment you enter? What image is the first to greet your spirit when the door opens? What memory is anchored in the things you've kept, even the ones you no longer look at? Objects hold history, and some histories keep battles alive long after you think they ended. Then notice what steals space. Which corner feels heavier than the others? Which item demands attention without speaking? Sometimes the strongest battles aren't loud. They're buried in the things we refuse to release because they remind us of who we used to be, even if that version no longer serves us. Then, notice what aligns with your vulnerability. What stands closest to your bed, where your defenses are lowest? What sits beside the place where you dream? What hangs above the spot where you surrender to sleep? Your deepest openness happens when your eyes are closed, and whatever you allow near your resting body shapes the tone of your spirit before dawn. And when you see it, the item, the habit, the placement, the presence you once ignored, make one change. Don't wait for confirmation. Don't ask someone else to approve. Don't tell yourself you're overreacting. Just change one thing in your room that no longer agrees with who you are becoming. Because battles are reclaimed one decision at a time, and the smallest shift in the physical can break the deepest agreement in the unseen. Move the object. Remove the object. Cover the object. Or replace the object with something that carries peace instead of weight. Only you will know which action is needed. Because only you have felt what steals strength when the lights go out. If you make that change tonight, if you choose awareness over comfort, if you reclaim even a single corner of the space where your spirit rests, comment done. Let's see how many warriors take back their ground, quietly, deliberately, victoriously. This is how it begins, not with noise, but with authority. Before I close tonight, there's something I need to admit. For years, I thought the attacks came from what surrounded my bed, what I could see, touch, rearrange. The pictures on the wall, the objects on the nightstand, the items facing me when I slept. I believed the position of things determined the position of my spirit. And yes, what faces your bed affects what faces your spirit. But that understanding was only half of the truth, the half I was willing to accept. Until the night, everything shifted. Because the first breakthrough didn't come from changing what I could see. It came when I confronted what I avoided looking at, the thing I always felt but never named. I need you to hear this carefully. There is a difference between what you place in your room and what settles in your room. Some things arrive by choice, some things stay by agreement, and some things wait beneath you, quietly feeding on what you don't guard. That night, the night I told you about, when I woke and felt watched without seeing eyes, I realized something wasn't hovering over me. It was beneath me. A presence I never acknowledged, yet one that responded whenever I felt weakest. A weight under the bed, not physical, not visible, but present enough to pull strength without laying a single hand. People asked why I rarely felt rested, why peace felt temporary, why my thoughts felt scattered the moment I woke. I couldn't explain it then, but I know now, you can't fight what you refuse to uncover. And some access points hide below, where you never bend to look. It took courage to face what I found under me, and what I removed from there changed everything. But listen closely. I've shared what stands near the bed. I've shared what faces the bed. But I haven't yet revealed what lies under the bed, and why it matters more than the rest combined. Lean closer. The object that faces your bed affects what faces your spirit. But there's one more setup I haven't revealed yet, because it involves what's under your bed. Short pause. Let the silence sink in like a breath held before confession continues. If you want me to expose that in the next video, comment next video, because what hides under you might be what's weakening you. And once you see it, you can't pretend you didn't.